As award-winning filmmaker Christian Pinto noted in the preface of my book, Zenith 2016, all serious researchers contend that the controversy over the so-called Washington DC street layout forming a pentagram is not about whether it's truly there. Aerial photos clearly reveal that it is. Even the Masons who deny that they are responsible for it acknowledge its presence, but argue that Rhode Island Avenue does not extend all the way to complete the figure, and as such, the debate is twofold. Number one, was the DC Pentagram street layout intentional, or simply the coincidence of geometric lines? Number two, why is the pentagram incomplete? Now, the answer to the second part seems to reveal the first. First, the unfinished pentagram is a well-known symbol in Freemasonry. As Manly P. Hall records in his writing, quote, "The pentagram is used extensively in black magic, but when so used, its form always differs in one of three ways. The star may be broken at one point by not permitting the converging lines to touch. When used in black magic, the pentagram is called the sign of the cloven hoof or the footprint of the devil," end quote. Now, of course, Hall was writing in the 20th century, but was that symbolism known by Masons during the founding era? The answer is yes. In fact, one of the most famous master Masons of all time was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who made use of such a pentagram in the play Faust, in which the character of Faust summons Mephistopheles, the devil, to make a pact with him. As the devil tries to leave, he's hindered. As a result, he and Faust have the following exchange. Quote, "Mephistopheles, let me go up. I cannot go away. A little hindrance bids me stay. The witch's foot upon your sill I see." Faust answers, "The pentagram, that's in your way? You son of hell, explain to me. If that stays you, how came you in today? And how was such a spirit so betrayed?" Mephistopheles answers, "Observe it closely. It is not well made. One angle on the outer side of it is just a little open, as you see." The open or broken pentagram was used by Faust to summon the devil in a black magic ceremony. The famous author of the play, Goethe, was not only a Mason, but also a well-known member of the Bavarian Illuminati. And to this day, Freemasons proudly acknowledge that his writings are filled with Masonic symbolism, while books have been written about his Illuminist involvement. Now, Goethe published his first edition of Faust in 1790, and it was in the next 2 years that Pierre Elephant, with the possible help of Thomas Jefferson, came up with the street design for Washington, D.C. It's therefore provable that members of these secret orders were familiar with the idea of an unfinished pentagram before the street layout was complete. Now, admittedly, that does not of itself prove that the pentagram was intentional. But it is interesting that Goethe's play and the DC design were done during the same period. Because of the close interaction between the Freemasonry of America and that of Europe, it's entirely possible, I would say likely, that Elephant and Jefferson were familiar with the symbol and placed it intentionally in the DC pentagram street layout. Occultists around the world understand the power of these symbols and rituals, and they realize they're not only for conveying psychological concepts, but actually for coercing the mysterious and potent supernaturalism invited to take residence there. That belief is deeply preserved in all of the Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Kabbalistic symbolism that is part of Masonic history. And according to famous Freemason Foster Bailey, these symbols intentionally hide, quote, a secret, which veils mysterious forces. These energies, when released, can have a potent effect, end quote. Scottish philosopher Thomas Carlyle once famously added, quote, "By symbols accordingly is man guided and commanded, made happy, made wretched, end quote. As previously pointed out, Masons are, as a result, under oath, never to reveal the true meaning of their symbols, and when somehow they are compelled to offer explanation, they falsify the statement, even to lower degree Masons. Now, substantial reasons exist for why the designers of Washington's government center would have wanted to obscure the meaning behind the occultic layout of America's capital. If the public in general had been prematurely convinced of the end game prophesied in the DC symbolism, it would have been beyond the acceptance of prior generations who likely would have demanded change in leaders and facilities. But as time has moved forward, and increasingly it has become necessary for public understanding of America's heritage and intended purpose, little by little, either by providence, promotion, or even resistance, a clearer picture has emerged of what Manly P. Hall called the secret destiny of America. David Oveson, who became a Mason after writing The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, The Masons and the Building of Washington, D.C., whose works have been widely endorsed by Freemasons as well as Robert Hieronymus, who's considered to be one of the world's foremost authorities on the Great Seal. And of course, David Oveson's work earned praise from Fred Klangneck, the Sovereign Grand Commander of the 33rd Degree Supreme Council of Freemasons in Washington, D.C. And it confirms how such obfuscation was deployed on the Great Seal, down to the smallest detail, including how a letter was even cut from the Latin word seclorum, which is the usual spelling, S-A-E-C-L-O-R-U-M, in order to create the word seclorum as it appears, to contribute to 3 sets of 13 on the reverse side of the Great Seal. Now, after acknowledging that the top motto, Annuet Coeptus, had the obligatory 13 letters, Oveson points out how seclorum was letter cut to join the bottom motto, Novus Ordo Seclorum, so that the phrase would end up being 17 letters, which, when added to the 9 numerals in the Roman date, would equal a total of 26, or 2 sets of the number 13. Combined with the top motto, these 3 sets of 13 were very important to establish, Oveson says, in order to reflect the Trinity, represented in the Great Seal's Eye of Providence, and in the nominal triangle, he says, from which the pyramid is constructed, end quote. Based purely on the Great Seal's symbolism, the Trinity these 3 sets of the number 13 denote is authoritatively identified as Osiris, Horus, and Isis, the pagan versions of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, respectively. The use of the number 13 in this way also connects the Great Seal to the mythological and astrological significance of the legend of Osiris as the dying and rising god. It was evidently so important to maintain this talisman-like value, 13, that other phrases of the design and layout of Washington, D.C. were coordinated accordingly, says Oveson. This includes the laying of the White House cornerstone on October 13, 1792 by Masons, and the 4th of July signing of the Declaration of Independence 13 days after summer solstice, so that the sun would be on Sirius. In Egyptian mythology, the sun represented Osiris, while the star Sirius symbolized Isis, and 13 was the number of pieces of Osiris that Isis was able to find after Set, his evil brother, murdered and threw 14 pieces of him into the Nile. Isis searched the riverbanks until she recovered every piece except for his genitals, which had been swallowed by a fish. Isis replaced the missing organ with an obelisk and magically impregnated herself with Horus. Therefore, in Masonic, as well as in ancient Egyptian mythology, the number 13, used a total of 13 times on the Great Seal, counting front and back, is the number that represents the return or resurrection of Osiris. This mythology was so meaningful to the founding of the United States and the construction of its capital, including having the missing Osiris genitalia represented by the 6,666 inches high Egyptian obelisk known as the Washington Monument, that nearly all of David Oveson's 500-plus page Secret Architect of Our Nation's Capital is dedicated to establishing the singular correlation between Washington, D.C. and Virgo, the constellation of Isis, or what Oveson calls, quote, Isis, who was the chief of the feminine mystery deities and the prototype of the stellar Virgo, end quote. This affiliation existed from the very day that Freemasons gathered on April 15, 1791, beginning appropriately at 3:30 p.m., reflecting the mystical value of 33, because of the astrological position of Jupiter in Virgo, and what this would mean for the secret destiny of America. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Jupiter, it was written, began to rise over the horizon. It was in 23 degrees of Virgo. By this means, the zodiacal power of Virgo, which was called in later Masonic circles the Beautiful Virgin, was able to stamp her benign influence on the building of the federal city. A few of the many Freemasons present at that ceremony would have been only too well aware of the profound implications of what they were doing. It is quite clear, it was written, that the ceremonial placing of the stone related to more than merely the founding of the federal district. It was somehow linked to the future destiny of America itself. By dedicating the United States through its astrological alignment to the Virgin constellation of Isis, the founders had dedicated the destiny of America to fulfilling the secret doctrine of Freemasonry, as also reflected in the Osiris-Apollo symbolism of the Great Seal concerning subservience, now and upon his return as Antichrist to Osiris, Apollo, Nimrod. Interestingly, the same dedication to Osiris, Isis, Apollo exists in New York, where the events of September 11, 2001 initiated the push toward the Novus Ordo Seclorum. The Statue of Liberty in New York's harbor, which holds the Masonic Torch of Enlightenment, was presented in 1884 as a gift to American Masons by the French Grand Orient Temple Masons. Designed by French Freemason and sculptor Frederic Auguste Bartholdi, and built by another French Freemason, Gustave Eiffel, the statue was originally identified as the goddess Isis, with the statue's head formed to represent the Greek sun god Apollo, as preserved on an ancient marble tablet, today in the Archaeological Museum of Corinth, Greece. Apollo was represented as a solar deity, dressed in a similar robe and having on its head a radiant crown with the 7 spiked rays of the Helios, Apollo's sun rays, it says. The legend of Osiris and Isis, the connection with Apollo, the magical number 13, and the history surrounding their mythos is often openly discussed in Masonic and Brotherhood-friendly literature. For instance, in Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike enumerated the esoteric significance of the Osiris epic at length, adding that lower-level Masons, what sometimes is called blue Masonry, are ignorant of its true meaning, which is only known to those who are initiated into the mysteries, Pike said. He also spoke of the star Sirius, connected to Isis and it linked to Lucifer, Satan, as still glittering in the Masonic lodges as the blazing star. Elsewhere in Morals and Dogma, Pike reiterated that, quote, the all-seeing eye was the symbol of Osiris, and that the sun was termed by the Greeks the eye of Jupiter and the eye of the world, and his is the all-seeing eye in our lodges, end quote. So once people understand this illuminated Masonic connection to the Trinity on America's Great Seal, and what the prophetic symbolism, mottos, and numerology imply, it becomes apparent why so much effort was put forward for so long by those who felt it was necessary to hide this extraordinary destiny. Oveson also acknowledges that conspiracy of silence as well, writing, quote, the motto at the top of the seal, Anawet Coeptus, is from Virgil, from the Aeneid. This is a prayer to the god Jupiter. We should observe that while the subject matter of the reverse of the seal is undoubtedly pagan, if symbolic of Hermetic Egypt, the superior motto is itself a prayer to a pagan god. Could this be the reason why there has been so much reluctance to bring the reverse of the seal into the light of day? Whatever the nature of the god, the prayer directed in this way is a petition that the daring undertaking, the secret destiny of America as symbolized in finishing the pyramid, may be completed and that the new age will find fulfillment, end quote. The information that I just shared with you is only the tip of the iceberg of what I reveal in my new book, Zeitgeist 2025. In fact, much of what I uncover in this book is too hot for mainstream platforms like YouTube and Facebook and would immediately be censored. But now, for the first time ever, you are going to discover hidden secrets and forgotten prophecies surrounding the year 2025, how the current U.S. government is tied to America's occult destiny, lost prophecies from Qumran forecasting 2025 as the final age of man, why historians and intelligence agencies foresee a totalitarian world government by 2025, how America's capital city is laid out to actuate the arrival of the Antichrist, about the malevolent Orwellian Trinity currently converging, the means by which the population's thinking and speaking are being homogenized to create a nation of assimilated devotees who are going to embrace the Antichrist, the deep esoteric meanings that names and titles held in ancient societies, the impact they had upon destiny, and what that precedent could mean now for America's near future. Who the mysterious character Melchizedek of Genesis 14 truly was, what the people of the name covenant is, and much more. So go to sidroth.org/horn or click the link below to get your digital copy of my revelatory new book, Zeitgeist 2025, so you can count yourself among the ones prepared for what is coming next.